Thank you. I'm delighted to be here to share with you something of my journey with horses, which began when I was 12 years old, when my Polish dad decided to make me an unsuitable and unlikely gift. The gift cost £75, which was rather a lot of money for my dad at the time, and the gift had a name, September Lad. Now, you might be thinking smart little show pony, or maybe even miniature racehorse. But September Lad lived up to the second part of his name rather than the first. In fact, my dream of having my first pony was rather short-lived when Laddie, as he became to be known, left his field, in fact every field we put him in, to go and find himself a mare. And eventually the farmers got fed up with this and said, no more, he's got to go. So that was the end of my dream. 40 years later, these chaps came into my life. They were very young, and they took a lot of work. I'm very fortunate, very privileged to work with horses and spend most of my week in their amazing company. And often when I'm with them, I like to try and imagine life from their point of view. What does it actually feel like to be a horse? Can you imagine just living your life without having to ask for permission to do anything? Can you imagine lying down on the earth at night with the stars overhead and listening to the owls calling at night? Can you imagine waking up every morning to the warmth of the sun on your back? Can you imagine the quietest mind? Horses have captured the human imagination ever since we could think and feel. Our earliest dreams were of horses, and their forms were etched into the walls of caves across Europe. I'm having a bit of a problem here. In the final book of Gulliver's Travels, the traveller Captain Gulliver discovers horses as wise philosophers, presiding over a nation in which humans are the brutes. Gulliver spends 3 years with these wise creatures, and in that time, he learns that the horses have no concept of evil, they do not know how to lie, they spend their lives devoted to friendship, cooperation, and benevolence. There is no quarrelling, no jealousy, or discontent. After 3 years of living on a diet of porridge and honey, Gulliver learns of the 1,000 faults in himself and decides never to return to humankind. As these things go, he does end up going home to London, and his wife and children are somewhat surprised to see him because he's been away for 3 years or longer, and they think he's dead. At first, family relations are somewhat strained because he cannot bear to eat in the same room as them because their smell offends him. So he spends his time wandering around their home in London with his nose stuffed with lavender or tobacco, just so he can't smell them. And eventually, he concedes to dine with his wife, as long as she's seated at one end of the long dining table and he at the other. Things improve in the Gulliver household when he buys 2 horses, and he spends 4 hours a day in their company, tenderly grooming them, breathing in their sweet scent, and conversing in their civilized company. Now, Gulliver's Travels was published in 1726, anonymously, because it was making some very witty, astute observations about human nature. But what strikes me about the book now, and I've read it many times, is how vital and true are the observations of horse nature. For Gulliver, the horses are masters of life and magicians of impeccable behavior. They teach him about himself, about his own nature, which is why he finds it so difficult to tear himself away from them. And it's an irony, isn't it, that these wise, benevolent beings had to give up their lives for us in war so that we could learn the lessons that we needed to learn, when those lessons might have been learned in so many other ways. We will never know. The correct response to such a swathe of death is only sadness and silence. The horses, as I said, have no concept of evil. In their world, there is no jealousy, and I know that's strictly not true, because if you put down a big pail of hay in a field with a bunch of horses, there is going to be some quarrelling. What the horses teach Captain Gulliver is wisdom through self-knowledge. They teach him how to understand himself, and horses are very good teachers of the self. They teach us how to recognize ourselves, how to understand who we truly are. When you're with a horse sees right through the human mask that you wear. They see right through to the core of you, because they want you to be authentic. With a horse, they help you to see that when you act with integrity, you are enough. Stacey has rarely felt enough. In her life, she has had difficulty coming to terms with her pain from depression. Drugs have helped, but they've taken the edge off the pain, but they have not helped her to become well. For Stacey, the horses are showing her a way forward to peace of mind. And she told me not very long ago, a few weeks ago, that if it weren't for this moment of peace, then she would consider taking her own life. Things are that bad for her. What the horses are helping her to find for herself is freedom. Freedom from blame. She blames herself for her own pain, for the fact that she so far hasn't been able to find a way to become well. She has 2 children and a supportive partner. What the horses are showing her is her own resilience and strength. They're helping her to see that she can find the inner resources that she needs to become well again. Robbie is another one of the young people that we're working with. He's often afraid to go home because of a difficult relationship, and the problems prey on his mind constantly. He's never free from the worry that this relationship poses for him, except when he's with the horses. Now, if he could, he would spend all his life with the horses. There is something about Robbie that the horses are drawn to. He has an open, trusting, quiet presence, and the horses are really drawn to that, because he is absolutely himself when he's with the horses, and the horses know that, and they want to spend time with him. And for him, that's really, really therapeutic, to know that he can find a friend in the horses. For him, that means everything. And for those moments when he finds that connection, he is able to take his mind off the pain of the relationship waiting for him at home. Suicide is difficult to talk about. I know this because my closest friend at school, somebody I'd known for 20 years, and somebody who was very important in my life, took his life a few months before his 40th birthday. Steve should not have become a suicide statistic. He was a man of great adventure, as you can see from the slide. He loved impossible projects. And in my back pocket, I've actually got the remains of the sunglasses he wore on a trip halfway up to Everest, a trip he made before he died. It took me a long time to understand why he chose to end his own life. Suicide is so strange. It really does have a very disorientating effect on the people left behind. And I spoke to very few people about it, but what I did do is I went out walking, because it was the only way I could make sense of what had happened. And while I was out walking, I imagined that Steve was walking by my side, and I was able to have a conversation with him about what he was planning to do. Now, I've since done some suicide prevention training, and I know that those conversations, talking about suicide, using the word suicide, is really important. The walks and my conversations helped me to understand one thing, and that is that suicide is a narrative. It's part of our human narrative. And Steve's father committed suicide, and I believe that the only way he could understand the story of suicide was by becoming part of that story himself. Working with my young horses helped me to come to terms with my deep loss. There is a lot of work to do around horses, especially young Arabians, as these two are, and I poured my grief, my sense of loss, into their training and their education. And I learned my own life lessons through this. I learned that adventure was still a possibility for me, because I can remember after Steve died thinking that that part of my life was over. We'd gone on many adventures together, and I thought we would continue to do so until the rest of our lives. So finding adventure and a sense of connection to life in all its vital exuberance again with the horses plugged me back into life. So I'm incredibly grateful to them for giving me that opportunity. I remember about 2 years into my new journey of exploration when a colleague at work casually noticed that I looked happier and asked me if something had happened. And I said, yes, something had shifted. Now I wish I'd been braver, because suicide is a social problem we cannot afford to ignore. 16 people take their lives in the UK every day. That's 6,000 people a year. Suicide is the biggest killer of young men under the age of 45. This is something that I think that now we can start to think about changing in our small way with our social enterprise. We are creating a space for people who may have suicidal thoughts and deep depressions to come and explore their thoughts, to come and tell their stories in the company of these gentle, wise animals who provide a sense of openness and space. What we're doing with the horses is giving people a chance to feel accepted and to feel well. The horses act as models of well-being. In their presence, people feel more connected to nature, because we work outside. We tend not to work with horses confined. They feel more connected to life itself. When people arrive, often their shoulders are hunched, and then a little bit of time in the horses, they relax, they start to smile, and they start to tell stories. The horses engage people in a way that we've been told by wellbeing coordinators that we work with. We work quite closely with volunteering organisations and the NHS. The horses can achieve in minutes what would take mental health professionals several weeks to achieve. So it's my hope that with enough imagination, creativity and courage, we can create a new experience of mental health care where people feel connected rather than abandoned by the mental health system. In this new society, doctors will be able to prescribe a wellbeing course on a farm, or a kitchen, or a garden, or an art studio. And doctors will be asking people, what makes you feel well? What makes you feel alive? What connects you to life? And people will be able to choose from a range of social prescription services that suit them and help them to plug into life. I'd like to finish with a story of how I learned, like Captain Gulliver, to trust and respect the intelligence of the equine mind. I was made a gift of another pony at a later age. Here she is. Her name's Tinker. She's a Dartmoor pony, and she's one of the most inquisitive, playful, extraordinary ponies you could ever meet. Now, one day I was at our yard, and the landowner left with a wave, and I was down at the bottom with Tinker. Now, somehow she managed to get caught between two strands of barbed wire. I'm not quite sure how it happened. It was a scuffle between horses. So what happened, she had her front legs in the barbed wire and also her back legs, so she couldn't move forward and she couldn't move backwards. And the wire was about chest height. And now, after about 20 minutes of using willpower, pressure, everything I had to try and stop her from bursting through the wire, I grew quite tired and tearful. Horses are interpressure animals, so it's their instinct when they feel trapped like this to actually use pressure to free themselves. And I knew that if she did this, she would tear herself to pieces. In my mind, I was thinking about calling the vet. I was going through many different scenarios in my head to try and stop this from happening. Eventually, my mind went quiet, and a thought came into my head that I should ask Tinker for help. And so I did. I silently said to her, look, this is not working. If you push, you're going to injure yourself really badly. I need you to help me work this out. I'll never forget the quality of the pause. She looked at me, and I knew then that I had connected directly to her mind. It was an extraordinary feeling that the pause had a quality to it. I can only describe it as a substance. It had a gravity to it. She looked at me, and the next thing, she lifted one of her legs up to chest height. And then together I was able to move it back, up, and over, and down over the wire. That was amazing enough. And then she did it with the second leg, and then with the two back legs, she was able to lift herself up and out and free herself. Now, I was completely bowled over by this. She just sauntered off as if nothing unusual had occurred. What that incident taught me, and many other incidents since, we often, my colleague Jo and I, call on the horses to help us now, and we do it naturally, is that there is a higher consciousness at work. And this goes beyond what we know, what we currently know, what we experience, beyond even being human. And it is always there, waiting for us to reach into it. Thank you.